Welcome to another Townhall meeting. We're here at Paul's Pantry to celebrate how we feed the world in the ways of the Eucharist and how we as church continue to reach out to those especially in need. This month we are concentrating on the Eucharist and how that feeds us, nourishes us, and brings us into the oneness of God as we live that in our daily lives. Again, especially working with those most in need. Let's take a moment in prayer and ask for that presence of God to be with us. As we know in Scripture, that oftentimes in our lives we find ourselves at crossroads of how do we serve, how do we give of ourselves, how do we ask for that Spirit of God to gift us with the world that is larger than ourselves, overwhelming at times, and yet we find the way in which we can serve in small ways that bring about a big change in our world. So help us as church, Resurrection Parish, and the world in which we live, to gift us with this moment to share what we have, be good stewards of what God has gifted to us, and allow this to bless those in our world today. As we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Tony.
So it's a really big privilege to be able to introduce to our audience here Deacon Bob Hornacek. I've known Deacon Bob for many years as he went through formation to become a deacon, but prior to his work now as assistant director of Paul's Pantry, he was an investigative reporter and for Channel 11, Fox 11, and has had a really interesting life. But what I find, Bob, is your story of how you came here to Paul's Pantry to be especially interesting. So can you share a little bit about that, and maybe and a little bit more about your background as well?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I would say the path here to Paul's Pantry was, like most things in my life, a long and winding road. And like many of the best things in my life, it wasn't my idea. When I look back on my journey, not just to Paul's Pantry, but my journey into the Catholic faith, my journey to the diaconate, my journey into married life, all of these things was not the way I planned for my life to go.
So was your wife's plan to
No,
make sure that
no, it really wasn't
Not
at
that
all.
plan either.
None of it was. And that's kind of one of the ways I look back and think it's probably why it was of God, because I couldn't have planned it like this.
Right.
So to back up completely to this, before I even get to how I got here, born and raised in a very non-religious home, was baptized Lutheran, didn't go to church much at all as kids, as a family. In fact, in high school, college time, considered myself pretty agnostic. Didn't have much time for spiritual things because I thought, like many people do, I had it all figured out. I got it all figured out. I don't need that stuff.
Right.
Met this nice Catholic girl, ended up getting married to her. Got married in the Catholic Church, and it was the journey into parenthood that led me into the Catholic faith, because my wife was fantastic about spiritual things at that time. She was never pushy about it, never, demanding, if you're going to do this, you have to do that. But we were pregnant with our first son, and we bought a house in Alloway, right, 2 blocks away from St. Matt's, and we had no idea St. Matt's was even there. I told this in a homily once. I said, a lot of people come into the Catholic Church for a lot of reasons. I'm Catholic because of hardwood floors, because I fell in love with this beautiful house with hardwood floors. I had no idea it was 2 blocks away from St. Matt's. But we stumbled into St. Matthew's Parish, and we were going to sign up to get our son baptized. And the pastoral associate at the time was a friend of mine now, Kay Schumacher. And I like to tell people, if there's one thing the Catholic Church loves, it's paperwork. And so when we went to sign up, my wife checked all the boxes because she was born and raised Catholic. She was a cradle Catholic.
Right.
And it got to me, and they asked me about baptism. I said, "What? I think so." Okay, well, how about confirmation? I said, "What's that?" First communion? You got me.
Right.
And then she asked me, she said, "Bob, are you even Catholic?" And kind of proudly at the time, rather arrogantly in my mid-20s, I said, "No, I'm not." And she asked me the question nobody ever did, which was, would you ever like to learn more about it? And I've joked with her since. The answer in my heart at the time was no. I really didn't want to learn more about the Catholic faith because I thought I knew everything. I thought I had it all figured out. Right. But she was such a sweet lady, I couldn't tell her that. So in my strongest, best voice, I said, sure, I'd love to. And that kind of opened the door into the Catholic faith.
Did you fess up to her that you were a long-haired rocker prior to coming to the church?
I don't know that I did that with
If
Kay.
I remember your story, that's included as well, right?
I did have a, hey, keep
rock
growing
band,
out.
Rock band member,
Yeah,
right?
indeed. Grow your hair out while you can, because eventually you might lose it.
But
But no, that was, into music as a kid and all that stuff. Yep. Met my wife like that. But journeyed into the Catholic faith, and fast forward into my career, professional career. We've got 4 sons. And it was really the point in my life where I was trying to discern where I was going in life. I had a career, had this family, but I still just didn't really know where I was going. And that was when, it was about 2007 or so, that I stumbled into the Adoration Chapel at St. Peter and Paul. Because I was working late, working nights, and I thought, maybe I should start going to work out at night. Maybe I should go and pray, because I probably don't need to just be sitting up at night watching TV and drinking a beer. I thought maybe there's something better I could be doing with my time. So I started exercising more, and I found this 24-hour prayer chapel where you could pray in the presence of the Eucharist. And I thought, gosh, I should figure out what that's all about, because I don't know if I buy into that. And so I stumbled into that prayer chapel, and that was where I felt this over several months. Really started to feel this deep connection to our Lord in the Eucharist, and really started to ask the Lord questions about where my life was heading. And that's where I started to get this desire to serve, specifically in the diaconate. That's where that kind of came out. So that's where I met you, Tony, and I went through formation, kind of kicking and screaming, because it wasn't really my...
Seemed like it.
Wasn't really my idea. I kind of just thought, I just don't know about this. Somebody asked me, when I knew I was going to be ordained. And I said, I honestly didn't know I was going to be ordained until the night before I was ordained. I just kind of felt like it was God testing me. Like, hey, it's kind of like, is it the story of Abraham and Isaac? Like, I'm going to do it. I swear, God, I'm going to do it. If you don't stop me, I'm going to do it. And I was waiting for him to be like, no. I just wanted to see if you were going to do it, but I got something else for you. But went forward and was ordained, which has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And it was during that time that I was really discerning my professional life. So I was getting ready, to be ordained in May of 2017. And I'm going to take a side note quick, okay? Because there's a beautiful poetic piece that happened. I was ordained on May 13th, 2017. Feast of Our Lady of Fatima. I looked back at a prayer journal from the time where I was really starting to pray deeply in the Eucharistic Adoration Chapel. And I found a letter I wrote to myself that described the type of man I wanted to be and what I wanted my life to look like and what I felt God was calling to me. And one of the things I talked about in that little letter to myself was about how I want to matter. I want to make a difference in other people's lives. I want to set an example for my kids. I want to, it was just this list of things. And it was dated May 13th, 2007. 10 years to the day before my ordination. Wow. And I get chills thinking about it, because I go, there's just no way you could have planned that.
Which makes total sense, because you asked nothing for yourself.
Right.
That you're going to be a good example. I mean, it was diaconate all the way.
Right.
Service to others.
And yet I had no idea what it even meant to be a deacon. And so when I looked at my professional career right before ordination, I had it all figured out. Again, my plan was, I'm going to leave the world of television news, and I'm going to go into some kind of communications field. I'm going to go into church ministry full time. I'm going to do something like that. And I was looking at a couple different jobs, and a couple weeks before ordination, everything disappeared. It all dried up. And I thought, I guess I'm going to have to stay in television, because I need a job, And, well, they want to keep me. And it's like, okay. And I thought, okay, God, I thought I was ready to move on. I thought the stars were going to all line up according to my plan. But I guess I'll be ordained and work in television. I knew it would be difficult. I knew there'd be a little bit of a rub because I don't know if you can imagine, but as an investigative reporter who's a deacon in the Catholic Church, there can be a little bit of times when those might come in conflict.
Right.
Because sometimes the church is in the news. Sometimes it's not always good. And as an investigative reporter, you have to do whatever comes.
You gotta dig in there.
Right. So after I was ordained, I had conversations with my managers. We kind of all made the decision together. Probably best not to have the deacon doing stories on the church. And I thought that's nice. It'll make it a little easier for all of us. So that got taken care of, and I didn't have to worry about that potential conflict. But I will say that 2 years of working as an ordained deacon in the media was such a blessing, and it was in ways I never thought. Number one was I was able to bring the presence of Christ to bear in a place he normally wasn't allowed in. In meetings, talking about coverage, in community events, and in interviews, sometimes contentious, but I was able to bring the presence of Christ through my diaconal service into those situations. But beyond that, I can't tell you how many times I'd be sitting down to do an interview with somebody. We'd get done with the interview, and then they'd say, now I know you're a deacon. Can I talk to you about my son? And they would invite me into their life.
Right.
And I wasn't prepared for that in the professional world. And then just within the television station, they had over 100 employees. I always said during formation, I didn't wear a shirt that said, I'm a deacon in training, be good to me. I'm trying to be holy, nothing like that. It was, you're going about your life. And, I always kind of hoped when people found out that I was in formation or they found out I was ordained, that they would be like, oh, I see that. Yeah, that makes sense. But it was never anything I wanted to announce to the world, like, hey, look at me, because that's kind of the antithesis of what diaconal service is all about.
So you had a few Channel 11 baptisms and weddings in there?
Not quite baptisms or weddings yet, but maybe, you never know. But I definitely became kind of the go-to resident Catholic and at times spiritual advisor to people as they were making decisions in life. And again, that was something I didn't really prepare for, and it was amazing though. It was wonderful to be invited into people's lives in a different way.
Great.
But I'd also always planned to go wherever God called me. And that was always my prayer was, Lord, you send me where you want me to go. And I'll do it. And in the television world, you work on contracts. And, I was always prepared to say, okay, when my contract comes up, if they decided they didn't want me, I better be prepared. So I better know what's out there in the landscape because I got to make sure I can feed my family. So about 6 to 9 months from my contract expiring, I was always taking a snapshot of the community and different job opportunities to see what would fit. And so about 6-9 months before my contract, I took a little survey of the community opportunities available and saw this job posted at Paul's Pantry for an assistant executive director. And I thought, I'm familiar. I know that place. I volunteered here in my formation. I interviewed the director many times on a show that I used to host and had been down here for stories. So I thought, let me give him a call. So I called him up and I said, hey, Craig, tell me what this is all about. And he walked through it and he was very honest with me. And he said, basically the board wanted to bring in somebody to learn the whole operation in case something were to happen to him or when he retires. And he had some health problems he was pretty open about. So he said, we want to make sure we don't miss a beat, that if something happens to me, we're ready to go. He said it's going to be learning the whole operation, top to bottom, inside out. You spend a year probably learning the pantry operations and all the food systems and everything with that. A whole other year probably learning all the administrative functions and how to run the nonprofit piece.
Did you get to drive a truck and everything?
You would. And he said, yeah, it's pretty. He goes, you're going to learn everything. Well, and I tell you what, I hung up the phone with him and I said, well, good luck with that, because there is no way I want to do all that. And I hung up.
Right.
Because I was just, again, I thought in my plan, I would be going to communications, full-time ministry. I wasn't going to go help run a food pantry. That was not in my wheelhouse. Well, for about 2 weeks, I couldn't get this out of my gut. It just sat in here like a rock. Like, why can't I stop thinking about this stupid food pantry?
Right, right.
And so it was about 2 weeks later, I was taking our 2 oldest sons at the time who went to Notre Dame Academy. And it was funny because I literally took them to school twice the entire school year. I never took them to school. But for some reason that day I was driving to school. And where we live on the east side of De Pere. 99% of the time, if I was going to go to Notre Dame Academy from my house, I would get down Webster Avenue, jump on the highway, and go to the school.
Right.
But for some reason that day, I went through De Pere and kind of took some back roads. The whole time, I'm having this argument with God in my head. My kids have no idea anything's going on. We're just driving to school. And I'm like having it out in my head with God. Some people call that prayer. That's kind of, but I'm like, I just don't understand it. Why can't I stop thinking about this job? This is not what I'm going to do. Why? Mm-hmm. And about halfway there, my prayer started to change to, well, I did say I'd do whatever you called me to do, God. But this is a little off what I was talking about. And so I got to, driving down Ashland Avenue, and I finally say, okay, God, I could at least put in a resume. But you've got to let me know if this is really what you want me to do. And I swear at that moment, I'm driving, I hit a stoplight on Vander Pieren Way on Ashland Avenue. As I came to a stop, I made that prayer, and a Paul's Pantry truck pulled out right in front of me at that moment. And I thought, oh boy.
There we go.
Here we go. And
Right.
I started putting in an application, and from that point on, it was a series of fortunate events, I call it, that happened that led me here. And I still sometimes have a hard time believing it because I couldn't have drawn up a better role for my life at this point. And now I've been here almost 5 years, and I look at everything that's happened. It's like God brought me here just in time. I got here about 8 months before COVID hit. Well, when COVID hit, we had to send home a lot of our volunteers. We had to send home some staff members because they had health issues. They were older, and it was too dangerous for them. And here I was. I'm almost 50 years old, but I still brought the average age down quite a bit, which is a good thing. Again, just in time.
Right. And you're healthy and breathing well. And all
Well,
that.
so far so good. But I like to tell people, and like I started this with, the best things in my life weren't my idea. If I remember when I met my wife, I was 21 years old, and I said, she was planning to move to Texas. I said, well, that's okay. I'm not looking for anything too serious anyways. And I thought, I'll never get married till I'm at least 30. Well, I was married at 24. I thought, I want 2 kids. That's all I was going to have, 2 kids. Well, we've got 4.
Kept waiting for that girl.
We just, still waiting. But, I say when I left television, you could have said, hey, Bob, draw up 100 jobs that you're going to do next. There is no way this job is on that list. Right. None. Not a chance.
Right.
I didn't even know it was a job. In fact, that was one of my big hang-ups. I was like, that's a volunteer thing. There's no way that's a job. It's a career. I'm not going to be able to have a family. It's not going to work. And somehow, some way, it all worked. And
So it's fascinating in the middle of that and you did a great job of kind of putting side by side the inner spiritual journey, and then all of a sudden here feeding the poor in Paul's Pantry. And how do you bring that together, that your inner journey being fed on that through adoration, your own prayer, now all of a sudden you're out nurturing others. Kind of the inner and the outer world of
I'll say there's
working with the Spirit.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I've been blessed to lead our adoration service at St. Matt's for some time. It was actually one of the first things I did when I started formation, because I found out, hey, there's a rite for Eucharistic adoration and exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, and you don't even have to be ordained to do it. Like you can have a lay person lead it if they're trained. Mm-hmm. And so I started that the first year of formation. And we've since done it, monthly for, going on 12 years now, almost 11, 12 years. And I frequently speak there about the idea where the Lord's opened my eyes to see about the joy of adoration, the whole purpose of adoration that I found is to draw you deeper into the mystery of the Eucharist so that you can have a deeper, richer experience of Mass. But adoration doesn't exist for itself. We're not made to kneel in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. And Mass, but we're meant to go to it to draw us deeper into Mass. But just as Mass doesn't exist for itself, I find one of my most precious moments as a deacon is being entrusted with the dismissal words. Go and announce the gospel of the Lord. Go and proclaim the gospel with your lives. I'm messing up the words. Goodness, I got them written down at the end of Mass now.
There we go.
Go in peace, glorifying the Lord with your life.
Or something like
Something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
But the idea being, Mass doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're not made just for that. We're made to go forth into the community, into the world. And it's almost as if God knows when we do that, when we go out into the world to try to live this stuff, we're going to get so beat up and so beaten down and so knocked down that we have to come back next week and get refreshed and get fed. And so, to me, it's a circle of faith. It's not just about Mass. Mass is great. Right. Adoration is great, but it's not just about that. Service to the poor is great, but there's more. You can't have, in my eyes, you can't have true service to the poor without the Eucharist. And you can't have the Eucharist without service to the poor. And I will say, in that story of my journey here, there was another moment I kind of skipped over because I felt like I was getting long-winded, but I have to share it based on that question.
You are a little long-winded, but that's all right.
And it was a book I read. That's okay. It was a book I read during the time I was discerning this journey, and it was basically a book on 3 holy women. And it was on Saint Therese the Little Flower, Mother Teresa, and Dorothy Day. I actually got the book from the St. Matt's Parish Library because I wanted to read about St. Therese the Little Flower. And they didn't have the story of a soul, so they didn't have her claim to fame book, right, her autobiography, so I got this other one. But I skipped over the parts on Dorothy Day and Mother Teresa because I thought, I already know them. I just want to read these parts. And so I'm bringing the book back to St. Matt's, and it was like this, I just felt like this hand guiding me. Like, no, don't return that book. Just take it into prayer. And so I went into prayer with it in front of the Blessed Sacrament and opened up to just a part randomly. It was talking about Matthew 25. And Matthew 25, of course, we all know the story, but it's where Jesus says, whenever you did that, when did I feed you? When did I give you something to drink? When did I clothe you? And Jesus says, when you did it for one of these least brothers of mine, you did it to me. And then it said, isn't it beautiful how Dorothy Day and Mother Teresa gave their lives to that idea of Matthew 25, of seeing Christ in the poor. And it's kind of funny that on the trucks of Paul's Pantry, I'll give you one guess what verse is on the side of Matthew 25.
Right there.
But, in those 2 women, Dorothy Day and Mother Teresa, they are, to me, shining examples of seeing Christ both in the Eucharistic bread and in the poor. And I think Mother Teresa has a quote that says, the Eucharist and the poor are inseparable. And I look back at my own faith journey in the church, and it was really hard for me to see Christ in his presence in the Eucharist. But through faith, through prayer, and over time, I came to love it, and I came to experience it in my soul. And it was almost as if I can see God saying to me, okay, well, that's good, Bob, but now I got something else for you. Mm-hmm. And you see my son's presence here. Now I want you to come over here because there's more to it. And it's like at Paul's Pantry, I've been exposed to that other presence of Christ, and that is Christ in the poor. and seeing firsthand what that looks like, what that feels like, what that smells like, what that is. And so it's been a huge blessing to me spiritually. I hope it's been a blessing to the people around me. One of the things I've kind of jokingly started to call Paul's Pantry St. Matthew's North, because I'm at St. Matthew's Parish, and I talk about it all the time. And we've had an influx of people from St. Matt's who spend a lot of time here. Now, to be fair, when I got here 5 years ago, I was amazed at the number of people from my parish that were already here. And I think it says a lot about them, and it says a lot about our parish. But there's something special happening here. And to me, it brings this beautiful faith we have. It connects the circle. Because again, you can have adoration on its own. You can have Mass. You can have service. But it's not until you connect the dots with all three of them that you start to see how one flows right into the other, and how a full spiritual life really needs all three.
Right. You talked about the dismissal rite and how you have that privilege of leading that rite and at Mass. And you've been sent here to be a leader of this community, this service site. Tell us a little bit more about Paul's Pantry and what you do here, and certainly connected to the Eucharist and what we do at Mass, but just here, what do you do here?
So Paul's Pantry is the largest food pantry in the entire state of Wisconsin. It's one of the largest food pantries in the entire country. I worked as an investigative reporter for 20 years, and I still have not found a food pantry in our country that feeds more people, gives them as much food as often as we do. And there's a couple things that make this place very unique. Number one, this is Catholic social teaching with flesh. This is, to me, what the idea of Catholic social teaching.
I was saying earlier, the Word became flesh.
It did, and
right.
I mean, we are dignity-based.
Yeah.
We live subsidiarity. We live solidarity. I mean, it is Catholic social teaching. And it's great because when we bring in school kids, especially Catholic school kids, I use those words because I want to make sure they hear them so they can understand them, so they go, oh my gosh, that's just a really hard word to pronounce. Subsidiarity. What does that mean? And we can explain it to them and explain what it looks like here.
Okay, now you got us all curious. So.
Well,
what is subsidiarity?
So from our perspective, what it looks like is we are a local food pantry serving a local community. And when you look at a massive problem like hunger, the best solution to a massive problem is best found at the level closest to the people affected. Meaning we don't want somebody from far away coming in here and saying, here's how you're going to feed people in Green Bay. No, we're going to take Green Bay people with Green Bay ideas and Green Bay food, and we're going to feed people here in Green Bay. Very much not a top-down approach.
As I was walking around all the food you have here, I was looking at all the labels, and they come from local
local bakeries, local supermarkets, and we will go out a little farther, but mostly Brown County based.
I'm looking over your left shoulder at the Glazers that come from Quick Trip.
We got some
Glazers.
Glazers, we can't open them up though; those are for tomorrow. But so what we do, so there's a very spiritual component here, but we're not a quote religious nonprofit. We're open. We're open to everybody. We serve everybody. We don't care how you got here. We don't care where you're from. We don't care what language you speak. If you have an economic need and you're in our community, this is your grocery store. You do have to qualify to receive food here because we realize there's limited food, limited funds, and limited volunteers. And we want to target them to the people who are most in need. I always like to tell people we have economic qualification because you know what? If somebody makes $1 million a year, that's great, but they're not getting free groceries. They can go buy them. It's just a fact, right?
Right.
So we have it set up to make sure we're screening people to make sure we're taking care of the poor. We've been here for 39 years. We'll turn 40 years old on Valentine's Day of 2024. This, right now, is the single busiest we have ever been over that 40-year history. And it's
grown a little bit more than what Leo
it's grown.
Frigo envisioned.
Right, it is. And I was giving somebody a tour who hadn't been here in years, who knew Leo years ago, and they were just looking around. They couldn't believe it. And I said, what would Leo think? And they said, oh, he would be smiling because he would be so happy with how well you're taking care of people. So here's how well we take care of them. The average person comes in here, they get a cart. After they get checked in, they get their cart and they shop.
A regular grocery cart.
Regular grocery cart. We even have, rickety, bad wheels on them like the grocery store. Some of them only make right turns or left turns.
We don't do oil either.
No. But they get to shop for their groceries. And the reason is we believe there is dignity in choosing your own food. Because if just the three of us, just the four of us shopped right now, we're all going to pick different food. Because we all have different things we like, different things we don't like.
And I've always found that you're not going to give them food that they don't know how to use or
right. We want them to have the opportunity, and we think there's there's dignity in that choice. We do have a route they follow, and there's two reasons we have a route. Number one, most of the time we're so busy in here it looks like festival foods the day before Thanksgiving. It's packed, cart to cart to cart. So we want there to be some organization to the chaos. And number two, we're so donation driven. We want to make sure that they see everything we have, because it might look this way today, but when they come back next week, the section could look totally different.
So you're like Costco.
Yeah, but they move it. Costco moves it around, so we buy more things. We just want them to see the whole place so they can know, oh, they have light bulbs this week. Oh, they have soda this week. But when I say we're as busy as we've ever been, to put it into perspective numbers-wise, so we're serving right now about 230 households per day, 5 days a week. The average shopper leaves with about 100 pounds of groceries, which is a heaping shopping cart.
Wow.
Now, if you were to buy that in the store today, with inflation, with everything else going on, it would probably cost you about $250 to $300 for that shopping cart. We are able to do it, and this is the best part, and this is where God comes in. We do this 100% based on donations. There's not an ounce of government food, not a dime of government funding at any level. We're not a part of Feeding America or the United Way. We don't get some massive corporate charity distribution. We are a pure, independent, local nonprofit that we exist solely on the generosity of the community. And that's where we get everything. So everything you see here, everything you see in our warehouses, it's either donated or purchased with donated funds. And you'll have to get a picture of the mural on the wall before you leave. But we have a big mural we have on the wall of the feeding of the 5,000. And the reason is because just as we hear that story in all four of the Gospels of Jesus taking the leftovers, the bread, and what does he do? The magic words he does, he takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, he distributes it, right? Mm-hmm. We do that every day. We go out into the community and we gather up the leftovers from all of these places, grocery stores, convenience stores, food manufacturers, bakeries. We gather up the leftovers. We bring it back here. We go through and sort it. We gather around the table and we pray before we distribute. And somehow, what we have picked up and then the donations we've taken and purchased food, it always multiplies right before our eyes into this, where 230 households a day, 5 days a week, will come in and get their groceries. They leave here without paying a dime. Everything's free.
How often can they come a week?
They can come once a week.
Once a week?
Yep. So once a week per family. We do have limits on the number of items, on the amount of each item they can take, just because we have to be good stewards. We're seeing, we see people who come here, they'll be here once or twice because they lost their job and they're down and they need a little pick-me-up. We've also seen people who've been coming here for 39 years because they are second, third generation Paul's Pantry shoppers because their family is in poverty and they're not going to get out. And we need to be here for them. So we can't give away all the hamburger and chicken this week because we need to have some hamburger and chicken for next week. So we're constantly adjusting our levels to be good stewards because we think, we have this privileged position in the community. And that's why I tell people I have the best job in Green Bay. I really do, because I get to see the community's generosity flow in on the administrative side, and I get to see it come out to the people and get to build relationships and get to know those who are benefiting from this. But we really sit in this privileged position here of receiving God's generosity from the community, and then we give it back to God and the poor. And it's just such a beautiful, privileged place to be in.
We've been looking at sacraments as moments of grace this year, and of course this month we're focusing on the Eucharist. And so how do you see what happens here day in and day out, 5 days a week, as you say, as a moment or moments of grace?
Oh, gosh, that's such a good question. I would just say, and I heard this a long time ago from somebody, and I can't remember who I heard it from, but it was just the idea that everything is grace. And, when I look at what happens here every day, it's a miracle. It really is. I mean, there's no reason this place should exist. It doesn't make sense. When I explain to people our fundraising model, they just shake their head and say, but there's no way. When I explain how we go pick up food, they're just like, there just doesn't make any sense how that happens. When I tell people we have 25 to 30 volunteers a day who show up, well, they say, gosh, must be really difficult to schedule. I say, well, no, it's not. We just say, all right, God, who's coming today? I mean, there's a couple jobs we have to schedule for driving trucks and doing some interviews, but for the most part, we don't know who's going to come that day. And God always sends us exactly who we need. I mean, I think of there was a moment, just about 15 feet away from where we're standing, we had a medical emergency a couple of years ago where a volunteer collapsed and was having some convulsions. And just from behind me, from one of those rooms back there, a woman came walking out. She said she was here signing up a relative for services. She came out and said, I'm a nurse. Do you need me? Yeah, we did. She was here just in time.
Right.
The moments, there are big moments of grace. There was a time, and I will tell you, people think I'm lying when I say this, or they think I'm crazy. And I'm telling you, it's the God's honest truth. There was a time last summer where one of our big walk-in coolers, which is the size of a small apartment, was empty. We had no food in it. And it's the middle of summer, and we're busy. And I had never done this in my life, and I just said, I'm going to do this, because I've heard this can happen. So I said, all right, God. And I stood in that cooler with my arms out, hands out like this. I said, Lord, please, if it's in your will, fill this cooler. We need your food. We need your help. Within a matter of hours, a company called us and offered us 10 pallets of strawberries. They got picked up that day. That cooler was filled. Just like that. The next day, another company called and said, we've got 11 pallets of strawberries. Can you take them? Now that cooler was overflowing. And I just sat back and I said, do I tell people about this? And so I started to, and they're like, oh my God, wow, pray for chicken.
yeah.
And so
we have enough strawberries.
We got enough strawberries now. Maybe
let's make jam.
But those types of things happen, and there's moments of grace like that. But some of the best moments, some of the most grace-filled times here, are with our shoppers and with our volunteers. Because one thing you realize when you come here, and I would invite all of you, any of you watching this, anybody come down here and see this place for yourself. Come volunteer, and just be a part of it, because it is amazing to see what happens. And I guess what I'll say about it is, you start to learn real quickly that people are people. It doesn't matter where they're from. It doesn't matter how much money they have. It doesn't matter what type of school they went to. People are people, and we all want the same things. Sometimes people ask me, hey, what should I donate? Is there anything you need? I mean, there's certain products we always like to have, but I always tell people.
For example, what are a few?
Well, for example, we like peanut butter, we like protein, we like canned meats. Non-perishables best because it keeps longer. Monetary donations are great because then we can have we can get a better price when we buy in bulk. If we buy eggs and milk and butter and orange juice and everything else we buy. But when somebody's kind of on the fence and they don't know what to get, I always just say, donate something you like. Because if you like it, guarantee you the people here will like it. Because people are people. And we have.
I don't like sardines.
Yeah, well,
You're not getting any
somebody.
sardines.
But I'll tell you what. When we have sardines, they fly off the shelf.
Yeah, right.
Right? And again, when you have 230 households a day coming through, you're going to have, we measure a lot of the products we purchase, so we know how many people take them. So we know 85% of the shoppers here take milk. We know 75, 80% take chicken, things like that. Well, one of our lowest items
Our sardines.
was pinto beans.
Oh, Santos.
And actually navy beans. Navy beans was even lower.
Okay.
And it was like 15%, 18%. But if you thought about that, with 230 households coming through, that's still 35, 45 people taking those beans every day. That's a lot of beans.
Right.
So I always say donate something you like, because people are people. And so when you get to know the shoppers, when you get to know volunteers, you start to realize how blessed we are, how lucky we are, and really how difficult life is for some people, usually through no fault of their own. Usually it's medical issues, just life. Life is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, because I'm assuming that as the shoppers come in, they're also feeling like this is a moment of grace. I mean, can you share a little bit about what?
Yeah, I will say, and
situations?
it's probably the single most common comment we receive from a volunteer who's new. They'll spend a day on our distribution line, or spend an hour on our distribution line, and they'll say, the people are so grateful. And I don't think, you can't come to Paul's Pantry and spend an hour working our distribution line and walk out of here the same. Something happens while you're here, and it's the faces of the people you see. It's the smiles from the children you see. Because again, we have people from every ethnic background in Green Bay. If there is an immigrant group or an ethnic group that's in Green Bay, they're at Paul's Pantry. And what you notice is their shopping habits might be a little different. They might take different items, but they're all the same people. Every people are people, and we all want the same things we want. We all want to be safe. We all want to take care of our families. We all want our kids to have it better than we did. But for some people, life is a little harder, and we are constantly stories shared with us from people who are coming through. One quick one I'll share, and this happened about a year ago. We had a volunteer group of business professionals. They were volunteering, and as we often do, we gave them a little tour at the end. One of the gentlemen in the group from this business said, "Oh, well, you have me in your system." And I thought, he probably volunteered here as a kid. A lot of people volunteer as a kid, and then they grow up and they come back. Mm-hmm. And so we're keeping on the tour, and he just says again, "Yeah, you got me in your system." And now I'm thinking, well, maybe he wasn't just a volunteer. Maybe he was on community service. Maybe he got in a little trouble as a younger guy, and he had to work some community service time. And so he's getting ready to leave, and I said, you mentioned we had you in our system. What did you mean by that? And he kind of started to tear up, and he goes, "Honestly, I don't know if I'd be here without Paul's Pantry." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "About 10 years prior," he said, "my wife had a stroke." And he said, "We were both working. She couldn't work because of the stroke. I had to go part-time because we had 2 kids. And we were broke. And we came to Paul's Pantry for food for about 10 months. And he said, thankfully she recovered. Everything's good. We're doing great. But I don't know if we would have made it without this place." And you hear a story like that, and you go, wow, that's amazing. And here he was now giving back. And there are countless stories of people like that. And at the same time, there are people who've been here for decades because this is their grocery store, because they're in poverty and they're not getting out, because they might not have the educational ability. They might not have the life experience. They might have a disability. They might have some medical issues. They might have some emotional issues or some mental health issues that keeps them out of the workforce full time. And so they're not able to work, and they need help. They might get some social security.
The common adage out there is, hey, they're lazy people. They should get a job. They should.
Right. And I would say, I frequently tell people when they come down to Paul's Pantry, the people we serve are not the people the wider culture thinks they are. Again, it is the common misconception in our broader culture that the poor they're just takers.
Right.
They're just lazy. I will tell you what, the people we serve are some of the hardest working, most incredible people you'll ever meet. Life has been really difficult for them. And it's usually not for what people think. Most people think, well, they just made some bad choices. I'm going to tell you what. If there were a line of people who've made bad decisions, I'm at the front. I've made some pretty bad choices in my life. I have.
Right.
But I've been insulated from the impact of those bad choices by having an education, by growing up with two parents, by having access to, I didn't grow up rich. I'm not rich today, but I always could get credit, had credit, could borrow money, could get, could find a way to get it done.
Right.
And the reality is, for a lot of people, that's not an option. And they might not have the experience, and they might not have a mentor, they might not have anybody to guide them through the process. And I'm not saying that there aren't people, there certainly are people in the world who are just looking for a handout. There certainly are people in the world who are lazy. But it's not that's not a quality that is only connected to the poor.
For sure.
There are plenty of other people all over that. Those types of things run the gamut, and there are all kinds of people.
Right.
And you really, what you come to find out here is you can't lump everybody together. But again, the people we see here, they're some of the most hardworking, kind, gentle, grateful souls who are just happy that somebody sees them, that somebody acknowledges them, and that somebody's here to help care for them in their time of need. And
I love your words of treating people with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful way to be a grace-filled moment in people's lives.
So my last question is, how does somebody get involved here? How do you volunteer? And what are some of the volunteer roles?
Yeah,
that
so
people could
I would say
fill?
the easiest way to do it is to just show up. If you're just a single person, individual, 1, 2, or 3 people with a small group, that's great. If you have a larger group, say a parish group or a Bible study that does it, or a business, we do ask you to call ahead so we can schedule it, so we have something set up for you to do. But really, we strive to be as accessible to volunteers as possible. I always tell people, you will never find a more volunteer-friendly organization than Paul's Pantry, because it's our lifeblood. We exist solely on the generosity of the community. We have a small staff of about a dozen full-time employees. We are mostly behind the scenes pulling strings to get everything lined up, making sure the trucks have insurance, and making sure the relationships are good in the community with our partners, making sure the place is clean and safe and all that. But we really want to create the environment for the volunteers to do the work and to be with the people. So we have everything from whatever somebody's skill level is, we will find a volunteer ability to match. For people who like to drive, we've got 3 or 4 trucks that go out on a daily basis that are picking up stuff in the community. So we always are looking for people to drive. We're always looking for people, if you don't like to drive a big truck because it's a little intimidating, we always have people riding on the trucks to help with some of the heavy lifting. Here in the pantry on the floor, in the morning, we're doing a lot of sorting, going through produce, going through bread, making sure everything's good, because we only put out the good stuff. We have a lot of stocking going on, so it's a little more physical. We have a large group of volunteers who come at 9 o'clock or just before 9 for our opening prayer, and then they come and work the floor during distribution, because that's really the heart of it, is seeing that distribution. I will say, it's busy, it's stressful, sometimes it's not pretty, because that's the life of living the gospel. Sometimes it's hard. Most of the time it's hard. But that's what we do. So we have computer work, office work, manual labor, stocking, taking out garbage. But really the most important thing is just being here with people, smiling, getting to know people, building relationships with your fellow volunteers and with the people who are coming through the line. Because again, you start to realize as soon as you get here, people are people, and we're all in this together.
So not too long ago, we had a group from Resurrection, and we were sorting some food products, and guess what we were sorting? Beans.
Beans?
Back to that.
There you go.
Back to that theme. So,
Yep.
want to close this up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so thank you, Bob.
No, thank you.
Appreciate
Yeah.
Getting
Thanks.
to know you more and your neighbors, Resurrection, St. Matt's over there. So appreciate getting to know your heart, your soul, and especially your willingness, again, to bring about a sense of prayer and relationship with God, to loving neighbor, to loving self. It just keeps feeding on each other.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And thank you. I will say this while you're here. And please take this message back to your parish. But thank you for all of your support over the years. Resurrection has been very supportive, both on an individual level and as a parish, of the work we do. And I mean it when I say we couldn't do it without you guys, because we need everything from the can of soup up to the semi-load of soup. We need everything from the $1 to the $100,000. It's everything in between, and that's what makes the magic happen here, is God's generosity flowing through parishes like Resurrection and parishioners like you have. So thank you.
Yeah, maybe an appropriate closing might be a paraphrase from a prayer that Terry Nelson Johnson shared with us when he was in Green Bay not too long ago. He turned the grace prayer, the meal prayer, around just a little bit. And so his prayer was, "You have blessed us, O Lord, for all of the gifts that you have given us through your amazing bounty. And we ask all of our prayers through Christ our Lord." Amen. The church says.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Guys.
Thank you.